that both sides have made strategic mistakes that in some ways led to the eruption of this geopolitical contest. But of course, the other question is what sort of triggered it now? And the trigger was caused by strategic mistakes made by both China and the United States.
大家好，欢迎来到本期视频。先来介绍一下背景啊，马凯硕，中文互联网的老熟人了。他是新加坡外交界的活化石级人物，资深外交家、国际关系学者，在亚洲乃至全世界都相当有影响力。1948年出生于一个贫穷的印度家庭，靠政府奖学金一路逆袭。1971年进入新加坡外交部，33年外交生涯，从柬埔寨、马来西亚、华盛顿到纽约，一路干到联合国安理会轮值主席。结束联合国安理会任期后，转入学界，退休后也没闲着，持续著书立作，在全世界各地高频次演讲和访谈，在国际上活跃度非常高。另外，他在中国互联网上热度很高，一个很重要的原因是他一直在国际场合上为中国发声。在西方主流媒体舆论场里，长期存在着一种默认设置，如果一个中国学者为中国说话，那一定是在狡辩；如果西方学者为中国说话，那一定是拿了中国的钱，还要顶着政治不正确的风险。但马凯硕是新加坡人，还是印度裔，一张非西方非华人的第三方面孔，在国际场合支持中国时，天然显得更加客观。加上他长期担任联合国安理会轮值主席，发言的全球公信力足够高，这也是他的声音长期以来穿透力格外强的原因之一。再来看主持人罗强森， MIT 电子工程和经济学双学士，普林斯顿大学经济学博士。他年轻时便进入美国参议院，后来担任过参议院银行委员会首席经济学家。这个委员会直接管辖美联储和财政部，能坐上这把椅子，意味着他对美国最高金融决策的内核了如指掌。在那段特殊的金融系统任职期间，他频繁来中国开会，与中国人民银行进行过多次高层战略对话和高级别闭门会议，也与中国财政部、社科院、清华大学等重要机构保持着密切的学术和政策往来。而且他曾长期出席中国发展高层论坛，这是由国务院发展研究中心主办，总理级别的外事活动，中国最高经济决策层几乎全部出席。作为论坛的常客，他接触过非常多的中国领导人，所以可以说他是中美两边高层都深度接触过的人。好，话不多说，我们来看正片吧。
That both sides have made strategic mistakes that in the case of China, what I try to document in the book is that there was for a long time a very powerful constituency in the United States, the American business community that was so engaged with China, making lots of profits from China, and therefore that constituency always applied the brakes whenever the United States seemed to be heading towards a struggle against China. But what's interesting,
they used to have these treasury reports, and were they a currency manipulator?
Yeah, that's right.
And they always stopped shy of declaring that.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. And that actually is a demonstration of the point I'm going to make. And what happened was that this time around, when Donald Trump launched his trade war, the logical thing should have been for the American business community to say, stop. You have a lot of stake with China. Instead, they just stepped aside and allowed the trade war to carry on against China. So that was China's big strategic mistake. But as I try to document in the book, the mistake made by the United States was in many ways much bigger. And it was a bigger mistake because the United States decided to launch a major geopolitical contest against China without first working out a comprehensive long-term strategy on how you deal with a country that has got a population that's 4 times bigger. And the United States is only 250 years old, less than 250 years old. China's been around 2,200 years. Yeah. And what is shocking is that no thought was given to this at all before they take on an assignment which future historians will marvel at, that they just jumped in 2 feet first without thinking, hey, what am I getting myself into? You discover that the United States is actually having to deal with some major structural challenges. This is not just an accident. This is a result of deep structural forces in American society that have moved America away from being a thriving democracy towards becoming a plutocracy. And by contrast, in the same 30-year period, the bottom 50% in China have had their best 30 years in 3,000 years. So at a time when the Chinese people are experiencing the most amazing improvements in their standard of living, you must remember also, for most of Chinese history, the bottom 50% struggled to survive. They would die in famines and civil wars, and they had a very rough life. So after China has gone through the best 30-year period ever under the Chinese Communist Party, the United States is telling the Chinese people, why don't you get rid of the Chinese Communist Party? And the Chinese people are scratching their head and say, excuse me, I've had the best 30 years. And the Chinese Communist Party is succeeding because while in theory it is still a communist party, it is a communist party that is the exact opposite of the Soviet Communist Party, because the Soviet Communist Party was run by old apparatchiks. The Chinese Communist Party may possibly be the most meritocratic political party in the world. And the selection process results in the best minds running China today. You met some of them. You know
Yes.
Wang Qishan. You know how brilliant these people are.
Yeah.
Right? So by going into this old ideological reflex and saying, hey, democracies can always overcome communist parties, the United States hasn't done a deeper analysis and realized that this is not a contest between a democracy and a communist party system. It's a contest between a plutocracy and a meritocracy.
You talked about it being a party of representation, how that is maintained, whether that is stable. It is still true for the last 30 years.
Yes, you see, at the end of the day, running China, keeping a country of 1.4 billion together every day is a massive challenge, which is why for most of Chinese history, China has more often been divided than united. So the periods like what China has experienced in the last 30 years with the strong central government delivering phenomenal improvement in living standards to its people, it's very rare in Chinese history.
Yes.
And so if you compare the record in governance of the Chinese Communist Party, especially after Deng Xiaoping launched his 4 modernizations 40 years ago in 1979, it's quite amazing what China has accomplished. And the Chinese must always measure the record of their governance, not against what other countries have achieved, but what has been achieved in Chinese history. And no Chinese government ever in Chinese history has improved the living standards of the Chinese people as much as the Chinese Communist Party has. And you're right, I call it the Chinese Civilization Party, because the main goal of the Chinese Communist Party is not to promote or to export communist ideology. The main goal of the Chinese Communist Party is to revive Chinese civilization and bring it back to the standing and respect that it used to enjoy in the world for over 2,000 years. And the key driving force in the Chinese mind, which I think every American should be aware of, is that the Chinese are acutely aware that they went through something like maybe 150 years of national humiliation, starting from the Opium War of 1842, probably going up to the Japanese occupation and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So they've gone through a lot of humiliation. And their desire, therefore, is to regain the respect that China used to enjoy. And it is somewhat sad that just at the moment when the Chinese people feel that, hey, we are now finally achieving something meaningful, that's the time when America decides to slap China. And
But
so
let's
for
look
them, the only thing they remember is, you see, they're trying to humiliate us
Again. And in your book, you do a very nice job of showing why the Chinese challenge is very different than the Soviet challenge in terms of weaponization and arms race, in terms of ideology. There are just many aspects that you disaggregate.
Well, I think, you know, the reason why I encourage Americans to think deeper is that if they look very carefully at the track record of what China is doing and what the Soviet Union is doing, right? It is actually quite shocking that in the geopolitical contest today between China and United States, instead of China behaving like the Soviet Union, it is the United States that's behaving like the Soviet Union. Because I explain in the book in one chapter, I ask, can America make U-turns? So for example, the contest between United States and China will not take place in the military sphere. So logically, it should be in the interest of the United States, therefore, to reduce its defense budget and take the money and invest in R&D, because that's where the real contest is. But the United States cannot reduce its defense budget, because no matter how brilliant a defense secretary you have, whether it's Ash Carter or General Mattis, because the process of deciding where to spend money is locked in by the US Congress, and allocations are made to each constituency by the congressman, and therefore the defense budget is large, irrational, and unnecessary. And if the United States was serious about taking on China, it should cut its defense budget into half, but that's impossible. And in that so, it's like the old Soviet Union that also couldn't cut its defense budget into half.
Strangled itself.
Yeah, so in that sense, the United States hasn't thought very hard and very deep about how different this contest with China is. Whereas by contrast, the Chinese are quite happy, they're growing their defense budget, but at a fixed percentage of their GNP and not increasing it. And the Chinese are very happy that America has 13 aircraft carrier fleets, because each aircraft carrier fleet is draining millions of dollars away from the US Treasury every day. And paradoxically, in military terms, an aircraft carrier today is a sitting duck. And as an American professor, Tim Colton of Harvard told me, it just takes a $100,000 hypersonic missile to bring down a $1 billion aircraft carrier. So it doesn't make sense anymore. So clearly you need to have a fundamental strategic reboot in American thinking. And in that sense, I'm trying to be helpful to America and say, think very hard about what are the big changes you need to make.
One of the things that haunt people who are talking about, quote, new economic thinking and technology is the interface between this rivalry between the US and China, digital commerce platforms, and cybersecurity. And the story goes, these are my friends at MIT again talking, that if you set up a digital platform, it aggregates a lot of information. Hackers are able to use virtual private networks and disguise their identity and their whereabouts. So a hacker can be in Saskatchewan in Canada, hypothetically, pretend to be New York attacking Shanghai, or be in Armenia pretending to be Beijing attacking Washington, D.C.
That's right.
I've talked to leaders in both countries, very high leaders. They recognize that given all the other tensions and rivalry and scar tissue from history and potential for misunderstanding, that they do not have a way to verify. Let's say you make an agreement. We both pledge our trust to abide by the cooperative behavior. With the success in the presence of disguised hackers, you can't verify whether that's the case. And people are struggling now to try to figure out how to overcome this, because if you balkanize the internet and the trading systems, you're accelerating that polarization into competing systems. And I don't know how to answer that, but I think it's a fantastic question to be explored.
It is. You're absolutely right. And this is where one of my key recommendations in the book is that if you want to find solutions, there will be, of course, many challenges in the relations between the United States and China, not just in cyber security, it will be in law of the sea, maritime areas, and many, many other areas. The best solution is to look for multilateral solutions. And in the area of cyber security and cyber warfare, it's good to agree on one common set of rules. So I'll give you a simple example. You know, nowadays, with a good hacker can, in theory, unleash the waters of a dam, right? And then can you imagine the thousands of people who will die when the dams suddenly burst, right? So why not agree on one set of multilateral set of rules? At least agree on the rules first. Of course, implementing it, you're right, will be a challenge, but agree. We will never attack a dam. We will never attack a hospital.
Yes.
We will never paralyze the electricity of a city. We will never sort of thing. So you have at least common sets of areas where you agree, right? And of course, frankly, it will make perfect sense for an American military to hack into a Chinese destroyer. Of course, that's fair game, right? And then vice versa too. So that's fair game. But let's make sure you carve out areas and we say, in these areas you don't do anything. But of course, the interesting exception to all this, and as you know, since you're a monetary person, I point out that the real Achilles heel of the United States is the fact that the US dollar is the global reserve currency. And that, as you know, as the French then Finance Minister Valéry Giscard said, is an exorbitant privilege. It enables Americans to live beyond their means. So it's in America's national interest to preserve the US dollar as the global reserve currency. But by weaponizing it, the United States has created incentives for countries to move away from the US dollar. And it is conceivable for China to use blockchain technology to create not necessarily a new monetary system, but just a platform that enables countries to trade with each other without having to use the US dollar.
Yes.
And the minute the US dollar is no longer the dominant currency in global trade, it can still, of course, remain strong in the financial spheres. But once the critical part of the system, where it's no longer essential for global trade, disappears, the US dollar becomes vulnerable. And if it is no longer a global reserve currency, then American standards of living will go down. And that's another example of where it is in the interests of United States and China to work together.
好了，视频看完了，我们来聊点有意思的。马凯硕在访谈中提到一个非常有意思的观点，西方对中国最大的误判就是始终用苏联式的共产党来理解中国共产党，但实际上这完全是两码事。用马凯硕的话来说，把中国共产党理解为中华文明党，对西方人来说可能更好理解一些。为什么这么说呢？关键不在于改了一个字，而在于它触动了西方人能听懂的语言和文化框架。如果用中国共产党这个名字，西方人立马就会往苏联共产党那个模板里套。在西方人的认知框架里，共产党都是要解放全世界的，输出革命，输出意识形态，把本国模式强加给世界。这套冷战思维对他们来说已经深入骨髓了。而文明型政党这个概念，直接把参照系从意识形态切换到了文明史，打开了另一套解释框架。中华文明党这个说法对西方人来说最厉害的地方就在于，它一下子把西方人手里最趁手的批评工具给废掉了。西方批评中国最喜欢的套路就是意识形态指责，你们是共产党，所以你们专制、不民主、没人权。这是一套基于冷战模式的组合拳。但假如你转换一下角度， 把中国共产党理解为背负着5000年文明复兴史的中华文明党，西方人的整个批评框架就不好使了。你总不能说一个文明复兴是错的吧？你不能批评一个文明想要回到它本来的位置，所以这套指责瞬间就失去了道德支点。这其实是一种很高明的降维打击，把对方最锋利的批评武器变成了毫无意义的废话，而且把参照系切换到文明复兴，西方人至少不用再纠结意识形态了，他们可以不去判断共产党的好坏，只需要去理解一个简单的多的命题。一个古老的文明在经历了150年的低谷后，想要回到它应有的位置，这个命题对任何有点历史常识的西方人来说，不需要读懂任何政治理论都能听懂，因为它不是政治学，是世界史。它把对话的底层逻辑从好坏对立切换到了文明对话。西方文明的核心思维模式是二元对立，民主 vs 专制，好 vs 坏，我们 vs 他们。这种思维模式在面对其他民族国家时，天然倾向于你跟我不同，所以你是坏人。但如果你换成文明这个框架，他们就可以稍微跳出那个好坏二元论，跳出民族国家，从文明发展的角度去理解中国。说到底，这个名字更能让西方理解，不是因为它更正确，而是因为它给了西方人一个更低门槛的认知框架。而且中华文明党本身就是一个新词，它没有历史包袱，没有意识形态的负资产，西方人可以从零开始理解它的含义，即一个以复兴中华为使命的政党。这是一个相对中性的事实性的理解框架，比冷战对手更容易接受。所以大家觉得中华文明党这个词好吗？评论区留下你犀利的见解。好了，这期视频就到这里了。本视频仅代表个人观点，欢迎大家在评论区理性交流和补充。另外，制作视频不易，如果您觉得做得不错，感谢您动动手指，一键3连。如果您有更多想法或建议，也可以在评论区告诉我，我都会看见。我们下期见。